Greetings to each of you, whether you are watching this service streaming live at 10 a.m. Central Time, or viewing it from another time zone, or watching it later on video. We are glad you are part of our community. This service is coming to you from the First Unitarian Church of Alton, Illinois, a historic church with deep roots in this river town on the Mississippi. I am Mary Johnson, and our speaker today is Jerry Johnson. We begin a worship with a prelude by our accompanist, Joy Heft. Thank you, Joy. If you have a chalice or a candle where you are, please light it now as I light our chalice here, and we say that together the words projected on the screen. As the kindling of this chalice calls us to community, as the flame of this chalice reminds us of our values, as the glow of this chalice encourages us to hope, let there be light. Our opening words come from the Reverend E.N.W. Riddell, lead minister of the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Desert in Rancho Mirage, California, and are derived from the writings of Rumi, the 13th century Persian poet. Come, come, whoever you are. Do you hear that voice calling you, calling us? That voice which calls us together today is made holy by our presence wherever we are and by the sacred breath we share. That voice which calls us to remember that we are not alone and that we are inextricably linked to all other life, woven into a vast tapestry of existence of which we are a powerful, integral, and holy part. And just as we have been called together, we act as the voice, the heart, the hands of another call. The call to walk with the wanderers, sing and dance with the worshipers, proclaim the memory of those who have taken their leave, wrap the despairing and broken in the arms of love and community, and hold the hands of all of us who have broken our vows and call us back again and again to the covenant and work of justice, humility, and steadfast faithfulness. For this, we are here together today. So, my friends, come yet again. Come, let us worship together. Please join in singing our opening hymn, May Nothing Evil Cross This Door, number 1 in the gray hymnal and projected on the screen. The first reading this morning are words from Mahatma Gandhi. Let the first act of every morning be to make the following resolve for the day. I shall not fear anyone on earth. I shall fear only God. I shall not bear ill will toward anyone. I shall not submit to injustice from anyone. I shall conquer untruth by truth. And in resisting untruth, I shall put up with all suffering. And our second reading is from Ralph Waldo Emerson, who incidentally is the second cousin of Dr. William Samuel Emerson, the man who started our church here in Alton in the early 1830s. Whatever you do, you need courage. Whatever course you decide upon, there is always someone to tell you that you are wrong. There are always difficulties arising that tempt you to believe your critics are right. To map out a course of action and follow it to the end requires some of the same courage that a soldier needs. Peace has its victories, but it takes brave people to win them. Our preparation for a time of meditation begins with these words. Holy One, we have searched the skies as we were taught for you, and have found only darkness and heard only silence. We have chanted the words and sung the songs we were taught. We have said aloud the beliefs, and all too often, none of it has erased the longing, the pangs of fear in our hearts. So we sit here, empty, unguarded, unknowing, and let ourselves be reminded that this is how those suffering throughout history have also found the transforming spirit in their lives as enough to carry them through. In that spirit this morning, together we receive. Let us have a time of silence. Amen. The flowers in this vase on the pulpit are here to represent our joys, sorrows, or concerns. Flowers are used for happy occasions, sad occasions, and just because occasions. Although we cannot share these particular flowers, if you have a joy, sorrow, or concern this morning, please share it with those around you, or say it to yourself, or type it into the chat section on your screen to share with those who are watching this service. May we remember those who have shared this morning, those they have named, and those we hold in silence in our hearts.
Our message this morning is entitled The Most Courageous Act, and it was written by the Reverend Susan Frederick Gray, the president of the Unitarian Universalist Association. As a first grader, Ruby Bridges was part of the first group of students to racially integrate schools in Louisiana. In 1960, 6 African American children passed placement tests to go to white schools. Ruby was one of them. 2 of the 6 children decided to stay in their all-black schools. 3 were assigned to McDonough School, and Ruby was the one student assigned to integrate William Frantz Public School. She integrated that school all on her own. In that first year, many white parents pulled their children from the schools, including the parents of the rest of the first grade. Most of the teachers left too. For all of first grade, it was only Ruby and her teacher. As Ruby remembers it, her mother rode with her in the car with the federal marshals for the first 2 days of school. After that, her mother had to get back to work and to look after the other two younger children. So Ruby rode with the marshals by herself. Ruby's mom told her, "If you feel afraid, say your prayers. You can pray anytime and God will hear you." I highlight this because when I explore faith, I keep bumping up against courage. When we look at faith not as a set of beliefs, but rather as a source of strength that keeps us holding on to our values when it gets difficult, or a source of hope when we feel lost or in the darkest place, we are also talking about courage. In Ruby's story, you hear how her mom was showing her how to keep her strength up, how to keep stepping forward even when she was afraid, through prayer, through her faith. It is so easy to see courage as boldness, bravery, fearlessness. It's so easy to ascribe courage to others, to heroic figures throughout time. to put it on such a high shelf that it feels unattainable. I want to rid you of that idea of courage. Courage is something we all need. It is something we all can live in our lives, and it is attainable. More than this, it is needed, not just in dramatic times of history, not just in dramatic moments, but every day. We need courage to show another way to live, a way not based on ego or control, not out of domination, power, or materialism. We need ways of being in the world that don't place our sense of worth in being right or being successful, but rather in being human, in being ourselves, and true to ourselves. And for this, we absolutely need courage. As researcher and author Brené Brown says, we need the courage to show up fully as ourselves in our lives and to let ourselves be seen. Vulnerability begets vulnerability, and courage is contagious. She points to Harvard researchers who show that real change is sustained by leaders who are able to show vulnerability. This vulnerability is perceived as courage, and it inspires others to be courageous. We need this kind of courage in a world, in a country, in a society that needs great change. To do this, we need to learn about how to develop courage in our own lives and how to teach courage to our children. Courage is not simply a virtue. It is a quality that the rest of the virtues depend on. C.S. Lewis puts it this way: courage is not simply one of the virtues, but the form of every virtue at the testing point. Whatever it is we hold highest, if it is a commitment to peace and nonviolence, if it is a commitment to human dignity for all, if it is equality, if it is kindness and for compassion, respect for the interdependence of creation, to live these in our lives, to inspire them in our world, we need courage. For at any time to truly live these values, there will come a time when we need courage to stay true to them, to practice them at the testing point. Courage isn't just strength. It is a certainty, not just a forcefulness of will. We look to Dr. King, Ruby Bridges, Mahatma Gandhi, Harriet Tubman, Harvey Milk as people of courage. We see their lives and their acts, and we call them courageous because their work, in dedication to principles of human dignity and worth, of equity and opportunity, they risked themselves. Their actions made them vulnerable. Brené Brown, in her book Daring Greatly, describes vulnerability sounds like truth and feels like courage. Vulnerable comes from the Latin to wound. It means being in a place of risking yourself. Now, vulnerability on its own is not courage. We can make ourselves vulnerable out of stupidity, out of a thirst for drama or danger or adventure. Sometimes we are vulnerable because of our position in life. Vulnerable because of poverty, vulnerable as children to the power of adults, vulnerable for any number of reasons beyond our control. So, vulnerability and courage are not the same thing. In fact, Brown says, perfect and bulletproof are seductive, but they don't they don't exist in the human experience. All of us are vulnerable. Of course, we are vulnerable to the elements of nature and illness, but also to the risks of loving and losing, of trying and being unsuccessful, vulnerable to social and political circumstances. We are not all equally vulnerable, to be sure. Nevertheless, it is simply a fact of existence. Courage is how we respond to that vulnerability. And here is where I want to make a distinction. Brown talks about the problem of being so afraid, even unconsciously, of our vulnerability that we seek to control everything around us in order to minimize risk and avoid being hurt. When we do this, we separate ourselves from others and even from our own lives in order to distance ourselves from the possibility of pain. In this circumstance, beginning to learn to share yourself, your whole self, your fears, your needs, being willing to be seen is a critical step to developing courage. It takes courage to let ourselves be seen, but it is also important because it is in being seen, in vulnerability, Brown says, that we find the birthplace of love, belonging, joy, empathy, authenticity, and courage. The vulnerability of sharing our whole selves opens up a door to a level of connection in being and understanding that is a source of incredible strength and joy. On the other hand, I want to be careful about how we look at different types of vulnerability. Brown's definition and perspective is valuable, but it might sound different from a place of social or physical vulnerability. Many people I named as models of courage were or are people marginalized because of the color of their skin, their gender, their sexual orientation. They would rightly argue that they didn't need courage to get in touch with their vulnerability. They needed courage not to be consumed by it, not to be victimized by it. So courage is not the same as vulnerability. Courage is an inner resolution or strength to recognize our vulnerabilities, yet to go forward in spite of them. The courage to take action is not about being certain about what's next, but a determination not to surrender to the vulnerability, but instead to try to go forward despite the risks. It is important because I don't want to leave you with ideas that vulnerability is something we ought to seek or cling to. It is just as problematic to think only of our vulnerability, to deny our power, our agency, our choices, our worth. When it comes to developing courage, or teaching it and inspiring it in others, the very first step is being able to be fully yourself. Sometimes sharing your story of truth, sharing fully the way you doubt or fail, the way you experience the world, that raw truth, as Brown describes it, is the most courageous thing we can do in the moment. And in those moments, vulnerability not only sounds like truth and feels like courage, it looks like courage. And it can inspire others to be courageous in telling their truths, in being fully themselves and openly engaged. We remember our agency, and we hold on to the faith, by whatever name we call it. That gives us strength to keep working for what we believe in, to stand up and speak out when we look at something differently, to advocate for ourselves. We teach each other and our children and ourselves courage by living it in whatever ways present themselves, by getting off the sidelines and letting ourselves be seen. Ruby Bridges says she remembers that her dad didn't want her to go to the white school. Her mom did. She thought it would give Ruby better opportunities later on, and she thought it would matter to other black children and families. She said her parents talked all summer about it, and finally her dad was persuaded by her mom. I have no doubt that her mom's courage, her parents' courage, and the courage and that of the families that stood with them, and the teacher who taught and came to love Ruby, all helped her develop courage, the courage that stayed with her throughout her life. We teach courage by modeling it. We grow our courage by being able to name our own vulnerability, connecting with others by sharing our truth, but not getting stuck there. We grow courage by holding to our agency, our sense of worth, and our own power to shape our lives. We grow our courage by living our values, even at the testing point. May we all grow courageous hearts, and may we teach courage to our children. I offer the subtle reminder that this community of faith is supported only by your giving. We need each other, and in times of trial, we need each other even more. You can mail your gift to the church at Post Office Box 494, Alton, Illinois 62002, or you can give electronically by searching for First Unitarian Church of Alton on the Givelify app, or by using PayPal on our website. Give what you will, for you are generous people. Please join me in our offering prayer. May this offering equip us to inspire love and please join in singing our closing hymn, Though I May Speak with Bravest Fire, number 34 in the gray hymnal and projected on the screen. We have a few announcements today. If you have an item for the September church newsletter, please send it to Mary Johnson by this coming Tuesday, August 24th. The Every Wednesday Church This Week flyer won't be sent out for the next few weeks as Mary will be away. Please keep your September newsletter handy to have a reminder of what's happening at the church. Please join me in our unison words for extinguishing the chalice. The light of truth and meaning cannot be put out. We are keepers of this flame until we meet again. Our closing words. Be the ones you have been waiting for. Be the people who dare to show up in the places people have been waiting so long just for someone like you. This is our religion, and this is your charge. Our service has ended. Let your service begin. So may it be.